This is your 2-minute warning. 2 minutes. All right, if you could head to your seats, we'll get started. The best part of that announcement is watching Miss Ball float from one side to the other to close both doors, skipping across. Okay, anyway. Welcome back, everybody, for our second presenter of the evening, Miss Shayna David with her thesis, Give Me Limits or Give Me Death, the case for term limits on Supreme Court justices. Let's give her a hand.
On July 1st, 1987, President Ronald Reagan announced Robert Bork as his nominee for the Supreme Court of the United States. Within an hour of Reagan's announcement, Senator Ted Kennedy took the floor, declaring, quote, Robert Bork's America is a land in which women are forced into back alley abortions. Blacks would sit at segregated lunch counters. Rogue cops could break down citizens' doors at midnight raids. School children would not learn about evolution. Writers and artists would be censored at the whim of government. And the doors of the federal courts would be shut on the fingers of millions of citizens for whom the judiciary is the only protector of the individual rights that are at the heart of our democracy, end quote. Kennedy's speech was delivered before most senators even had a chance to review Bork's records. This broke the existing norm that justices were considered based on qualification and character. This felt more like a smear campaign than a Senate hearing. Bork was not being considered for a 4-year term or even a 10-year term, but rather for a lifetime. A single confirmation vote could determine the ideological direction of the Supreme Court for decades to come. The stakes of lifetime tenure created this warfare. Bork's nomination failed 42-58, but inaugurated a new era of Supreme Court confirmation battles, an era of ad hominem culture, calculation with resignation, and a sense of crisis with every vacancy. Article 3, Section 1 of the Constitution states that Supreme Court justices will, quote, hold office during good behavior, end quote. This clause was written on September 12, 1787, merely 5 days before the final signing of the Constitution and after several delegates had already left. Good behavior has been interpreted to mean lifetime tenure. In particular, Alexander Hamilton emphasized this in Federalist Paper 78, arguing that lifetime appointment would keep the court impartial and insulated from political pressure. Supporting this interpretation, the Constitution states its terms for every other position. Presidents serve 4 years, senators serve 6, and the House of Representatives 2. Combined with lifetime appointment, this clause means that justices are removable only by impeachment. In the court's 237-year history, only one justice, Samuel Chase, has ever been impeached. Chase was impeached in 1804 by the House of Representatives, but acquitted by the Senate in 1805, and continued to serve on the court until 1811. This means that all 116 justices this country has seen have been able to serve for as long as they wish, or as long as Father Time permits. Since the inception of the Supreme Court, term lengths have dramatically increased. The average term length before 1970 was about 18 and a half years. However, that average jumped to 26 years after 1970. This may be due to advancements in modern medicine, which have lengthened lifespans, or could be due to the increasing strategic calculation behind when justices choose to retire. A recent example would be Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg's refusal to resign despite obvious physical and mental decline. In September of 2020, she uttered from her deathbed, quote, "It is my most fervent wish that I will not be replaced until a new president is installed," end quote. Within our current system, an ailing 87-year-old felt compelled to hold her seat throughout 5 battles with cancer, visible frailty, and to her eventual death on the bench, just because she didn't want to be replaced by a justice of the opposing party. Ginsburg and many others maximized their lifetime tenure, but this system has proven more harmful than helpful. I propose that we need to pass a constitutional amendment limiting Supreme Court justices' lifetime tenure in favor of a non-renewable 18-year term with mandatory retirement at 75. The first reason we need this amendment is because it will reduce the stakes of each confirmation by creating a guaranteed predictable turnover. Second, it will align America with other global democracies and improve our rule of law score. And finally, it will reduce the risk of age-related cognitive decline and ensure the highest level of judicial competence. Partisan tension, or the warfare between two political parties, is a plague that has infected America for generations. Within our current climate, political divide seems inescapable. You're either Republican or Democrat, red or blue, and regardless, stigmatized by the other side. The Supreme Court, originally envisioned as a body of neutral arbiters, has had to confront this polarization, the same polarization that Alexander Hamilton believed lifetime appointment would guard against. The 9 seats on the Supreme Court are the most coveted judicial appointments in America, with both parties looking eagerly to fill vacancies. But our current system is essentially a lottery, with unpredictable vacancies resulting in high-stakes confirmation processes for each new justice. President Nixon was able to appoint 4 Supreme Court justices, while President Carter, despite serving a full term, never appointed any. Nixon had a stroke of luck with the Supreme Court and was able to reshape it significantly, reestablishing a conservative majority which has persisted for almost 60 years. The stakes of each vacancy escalate when it gives one party the ability to reshape the court seemingly at random. Over time, the confirmation process has become a partisan battleground. In 1986, Justice Scalia was confirmed 98-0, and in 1988, Justice Anthony Kennedy was confirmed 97-0. These unanimous bipartisan votes show support for the candidates they deemed qualified regardless of ideological differences. Yet in 2018, Justice Kavanaugh was confirmed 50-48 with almost an exact partisan split. And in 2020, Justice Barrett was confirmed 52-48 with 0 affirmative votes from the minority party. Additionally, in 2016, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell stated that the Senate would not consider a replacement until after the next presidential election. This delayed President Obama's nomination of Merrick Garland by almost an entire year. Yet, Justice Barrett was confirmed within 30 days of President Trump's nomination and only a week before Election Day. These confirmation battles have directly disrupted how the court operates. During the Garland blockade, the court was forced to convene with only 8 members, which resulted in multiple deadlocked 4-4 cases. Furthermore, the court's design produces many troubling incentives. Justices tend to hold to their seats when the party in the White House adheres to a contrary judicial philosophy. And justices may even feel pressured to outlast an opposing president out of fear of letting down their party. This structure also incentivizes presidents to appoint young, ideologically reliable justices in hopes of obtaining influence. For instance, Justice Barrett was only 48 when appointed, meaning she could easily serve until 2055. By that time, this year's kindergartners will be in their mid-30s with full-time jobs. 18-year term limits would temper partisan tendencies by coupling an exit with every confirmation. With a staggered 18-year term limit, presidents would ideally be able to appoint 2 justices per 4-year term, with 1 of 9 leaving the bench every 2 years. This is a predictable rhythm that would distribute fair influence across administrations. A vacancy in the court would no longer be like catching lightning in a bottle. More so, no justice would be able to hold to their seat in hopes of obtaining a partisan advantage. And even if justices do rule independently, the perception of partisanship can undermine public confidence in the court. An 18-year term limit is the reliable structure our court needs. Moving on to my second point, adding term limits on our Supreme Court justices would align America with other successful democracies such as Germany, Canada, Japan, and so on. No other established democracy grants lifetime tenure to the judges of their highest courts. America is the anomaly. The German counterpart of the Supreme Court, known as the Federal Constitutional Court, was created in the post-World War II climate of 1949 and was specifically designed to safeguard against the executive overreach which enabled the Nazi regime. 12-year term limits were central to their design, ensuring that no single ideology would entrench itself in the court, and this approach has proven effective. The World Justice Project's Rule of Law Index uses data from over 215,000 general population polls and 4,100 expert assessments to gauge the judicial effectiveness of a country. This index measures and ranks, quote, the extent to which government complies with laws, courts are independent, justice accessible, laws transparent, corruption absent, and the bureaucracy is impartial, end quote. These rankings provide compelling evidence that the judicial tenure systems of our peer countries support their rule of law performance. Notably, countries with term limits consistently outperform the U.S. in this index. In the 2025 evaluation, Germany was ranked 6th, Canada 13th, and Japan 15th, while America trailed behind, ranked 27th out of 143 countries, 89 of which being democracies. Since 2016, America has fallen 9 places and 50% in its percentile standing. These countries also surpass America in judiciary-specific categories. For instance, in the Constraints on Government Powers category, Germany boasts a ranking of 5th place with a score of 0.86 on a 0 to 1 scale, while America is ranked 36th place with a score of 0.63. That is a 22% decrease from 2016's score of 0.81, and a drop of 23 places in less than a decade. This decline signals a weakening in checks in our executive authorities and a diminishing public confidence in government institutions such as the Supreme Court. International data shows that the judicial tenure systems of our peer countries do not undermine judicial independence. The regular turnover of an 18-year term would align America with these other democracies and reestablish public trust. America should not remain an outlier, but should adopt the reforms that have proven successful in our peer countries. And now finally, contrary to popular belief, age is not just a number. The age of our Supreme Court justices is a crucial aspect of their cognitive performance. Life expectancies have increased dramatically over time. The average life expectancy in 1789, the year the Supreme Court was established, was about 58 years, not including child mortality rates. The average life expectancy in 2023 was 78 years. That's a 20-year growth, and that number is only projected to increase. When the Supreme Court was established, lifetime tenure meant something much different and far shorter. The framers of the Constitution could not have fathomed justices serving well over 30 years, or into their 80s and even 90s while holding their position. With life expectancies getting longer and justices getting older, an unavoidable reality is age-related cognitive decline. According to the National Library of Medicine, a study conducted over 30,000 adults over 16 years shows that on average, after age 76, 17% of adults experience cognitive decline without dementia, while 8% experience dementia. This means that 25% of adults over 76 may experience some form of cognitive impairment. Cognitive ability is comprised of two components: fluid intelligence, which refers to a person's problem-solving skills, processing speed, and abstract thinking, and crystallized intelligence, which governs accumulated knowledge through life experience. While crystallized intelligence may plateau or even increase with age, fluid intelligence, the very capacity necessary to interpret statutory language, assess nuanced topics, and orally pose and defend arguments, noticeably dwindles. This risk is recognized in other high-stakes careers as well. For instance, commercial airline pilots face a mandatory retirement at age 65, while FBI agents have an even lower cutoff at age 57. Now, these comparisons may seem tangential. Our justices are not piloting an aircraft full of passengers or dusting for fingerprints at a crime scene, but they do make life-altering decisions that affect millions of Americans, a task that should be held to an equally high standard. The Supreme Court itself has justified mandatory retirement for judges. In the 1991 case, Gregory v. Ashcroft, the Supreme Court upheld Missouri's mandatory retirement at age 70 for state judges, stating, quote, "The statute draws a line at a certain age which attempts to uphold the highest level of judicial competence and which fulfills a societal demand for the highest caliber of judges in the system," end quote. Missouri is not unique in this limitation. 49 states in the District of Columbia impose either term limits or mandatory retirement on their state judges, recognizing that intellectual fitness is a crucial aspect of judicial competence. Now, the objective is not to expel all elders from the court, but rather to minimize the risk of age-related cognitive decline. The average age of a Supreme Court justice at appointment is 53 years old. Adding an 18-year term limit to that would make the average age of retirement 71 years old, an age right before cognitive decline becomes more prevalent, according to the longitudinal study. Now, this age is just an average. Some will depart sooner, some later, and many justices will remain capable long past 71. And this won't end every instance of cognitive decline. But what this will end is the troubling dynamic where justices cling to their seat, whether out of partisan allegiance or personal determination, when their capacity to fulfill the demanding intellectual requirements of their role is compromised. A common objection to 18-year term limits is that the Constitution's original statement has been effective for over 200 years. The beautiful thing about the Constitution is that it was built to be amended and adapt to our country's needs. The Constitution has been amended 27 times because "this is the way we've always done things" is never a sufficient answer to tolerate a broken system. Structural reforms to our highest institutions are not an oddity. In 1951, the 22nd Amendment restricted presidential terms after FDR held office for 12 years. This change is never seen as unconstitutional or radical. During the first 80 years of the Supreme Court, its size fluctuated from 6 members up to 10 members based on convenience. The Judiciary Act of 1869 fixed the court at 9 members as the former system was ineffective. When 18-year-old boys were handed a gun and drafted to Vietnam, yet were ineligible to vote, the 26th Amendment lowered the voting age from 21 to 18 in less than 4 months, the quickest ratification in history. These changes were not unconstitutional, but necessary to keep up with an ever-changing America. Today's situation demands similar action. According to the Associated Press NORC at the University of Chicago, 2 out of 3 Americans, 82% of Democrats and 57% of Republicans, are in favor of imposing term limits on our Supreme Court justices. Amending the Constitution is a strenuous task, but not impossible, especially when public demand and the situation calls for it. For 237 years, Supreme Court justices have held lifetime tenure under the belief that it is optimal for judicial independence. However, it is time for us as a nation to move forward. Partisan tendencies have made the confirmation process a blood sport, while the lottery-esque system, constituted by random mortalities and strategic retirements, creates an unpredictable and easily manipulated system. The judicial tenure systems of our peer countries are statistically shown to be effective and trustworthy and outperform the U.S. in these categories. And finally, 15 to 18-year term limits are a concept of the past, as terms over 30 years are becoming commonplace today. As these extended terms carry a justice into their 80s or even 90s, the risk of mental decrepitude escalates, which is not sustainable in an institution where the sharpest reasoning and clearest discernment is necessary. 18-year term limits with mandatory retirement at 75 allow a justice time to learn their position, reach the apex of their career, and then gracefully step down from the court. Incentives and pressures to hold on to their seat out of partisan allegiance or to overexert their cognitive capabilities will be relieved, recentering the Supreme Court to clear morals, clear discernment, and clear justice. Thank you.
Okay, returning for our panel, we have Miss Angie Thompson, our SR head, Mr. Andy Crone, a former board chair, current board member, also former fantastic science teacher. We also have Mr. Luke Mars, who's our head of the SL, and Mila Beto, who is our fine arts director and does our theater company, the Citizen Theater Company? Yeah. So, you guys know the drill. Whenever you're ready.
Being too nice to each other. Great job, Shayna. Thank you. Mine's just kind of a basic, quick sort of question. You're looking at 18-year terms and then mandatory retirement is 75. Why do both? Why not, with the cognitive decline, why not just stick with retirement at 75 and see what happens with that?
Yeah, so though I kind of separate it into my two Confirmadios, Confirmadio 1 and 2, I think the 18-year term limit tackles the issue of partisanship on the court and justices holding to their seats and trying to almost game the system, and the mandatory retirement tackles cognitive decline. And I think they both work hand in hand, and you have the risk of one without the other, because with an 18-year term limit with no mandatory retirement, you could appoint someone at 70 and they're on the court till 88. That breaches that issue. And then same with mandatory retirement. That could incentivize presidents to go even younger with how they appoint justices to maximize the amount of time they have until 75.
Oh, wonderful job, Ms. Davis. I love the potential here to have a civics lesson. And I was wondering if you could tell us why there's value in a lifetime appointment.
Okay. Actually, this is a great question. I was really thinking about this, about what Alexander Hamilton was saying when he believed that lifetime appointment would keep the court impartial. And there was this quote that Mr. Pick told me, and he said, if you look at the government as a baseball game, the judges are the umpire, and nobody goes to a baseball game to watch the umpire. And I think that is kind of telling for what's happening now. I believe that the value in a lifetime appointment is that they're on the bench and you kind of ignore them after that. They're on the bench, you don't have to worry about when they're going to be replaced again, and they are going to do their job and they're going to do it to the fullest, and that is going to be a constant. However, over time, the Supreme Court has become sort of a spectacle, and I think that people have started trying to game the system. There has been pressure around when people leave and are reappointed, and I believe the value in lifetime appointment is consistency in that sense.
I have kind of a follow-up question to that. So with an 18-year term, wouldn't that be politicized every 18-year vacancy?
Yeah, it would, and I think that is a risk of it, but I think the known is easier to plan around than the unknown. If we think about presidential elections, they are very partisan and they get very heated every 4 years. However, it's not exactly the same because that sense of fight or flight is not activated, and And there is time to plan and prepare. And this almost goes back to the presidential elections as well, where you know that each president is going to get 2 justices no matter what. And that almost puts the heat off of the court and onto the presidential elections, because that's what it's dependent on. It's not dependent on if you leave right before the next election day, you will get appointed by this president or not. It's just that consistency of the presidents. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on that. I mean, couldn't the justices still game the system? I mean, like if for instance, a Republican just got replaced in an election by a Democrat, I mean, we still got about 2 months to basically change the Supreme Court justice. Is it possible that a Supreme Court justice could like retire right after? You understand what I'm saying? And still game it and like.
I think so. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like let me get off here quick before the next president gets to replace me or something like that.
Sure. Yeah. I think so. Right now in this system that I'm proposing, each president gets 2 18-year blocks, if that makes sense. So if their initial justice that they appointed when that availability was given to them retires at 17 years to try to put another one in, that justice would only serve 1 year. It would not start a fresh 18 years over. So that staggered rhythm still keeps going, because this is accounting for deaths and unexpected retirements as well. So you get an 18-year block basically on the court.
So how would you roll this out? Would you grandfather in the current justices? Or?
Yeah, so I'm proposing that based on seniority, you start with the 1 of 9 justices leaving every 2 years. So with the justice that has been on the longest, they would rotate out. You appoint a new one, they start their 18 years. 2 years later, the next one leaves. Next justice gets appointed, 18 years, and in order of how long they've been on the bench.
Do a quick follow-up. So does that mean then, so let's say this starts now.
Yes.
Does this mean that like the next 3 or 4 that would go, if I'm doing my math right, that's like 3 of the 4 conservative judges, right? So would that impact the kind of the balance or what the court looks like now?
Yeah, I think it would definitely change what the court looks like now, but these aren't just happening randomly. Again, this is dependent on the next presidential election. So if the first one happens after Donald Trump's term is over, it would depend on who is in that position. And then afterward, depending on if it is a Republican or Democrat president in the White House, that's how it would be rotated out. So yeah, there is a risk of the court changing in that sense, but it will be rotated based on the presidents.
Mr. Crone?
I wanted to ask about your second point, which is the one regard to the global index. Could
Yes,
you
sir.
remind me what that survey was all about?
Yeah, so this is like an index that compiles a lot of information from like the general public and also experts who evaluate these countries as a whole. Would you like me to list off the
So
categories?
I guess, first of all, it's ranking all of these countries across the world and based on how well we feel like, is it government operates or the judiciary system operates?
Mm-hmm. It's a little bit of everything. The total is like all of those averages put together. I specifically referenced the constraints on government powers because that's where my proposal directly falls into, because it would say that there are not good constraints on our government powers because they are appointed for life with very little restrictions on them. So that's the specific one that I called, but for the overall ranking, like when I said 6th place, 13th, 15th, it is a lot of these combined.
So, I care what the world says when we're like playing hockey and we're beating Canada and we're the number 1.
Mm-hmm.
But should I care about some global ranking here?
Yeah.
Explain why I should care.
Well, I think you should care. I mean, this ranking has no specific authority. It's just information. But I think this information should be considered because in a court that is for the people, all we have is the information that is available to us. And from what I know and my research, this is the most holistic, unbiased source of information in this sense. And I think this is just something to consider when we think about how our country is operating and how it could be better. And yeah, I think it's totally fair to think that there would be some bias in that, but this is really just information to consider.
And when they did this survey, you said, what were the inputs to this survey? I think you said there were some experts, but there was also just general population.
Yeah, so, yeah, it's a little bit of both. It's general population and experts, and there are 44 sub-factors of the index, and then they codify those things, and it's a 0 to 1 scale, like I said, and there are certain questions that are yes or no, and that would be a 0 or a 1 for yes or no. And then for other things where there's a little more nuance in it, it's kind of a sliding scale. There's a lot of information on this. I don't want to take up all your time.
That's fine. And so you said Germany was ranked high, and we're kind of maybe a fair ways down.
Correct.
Is there anybody else on the list near where we're at that, you could give me as an example? I'm just not sure.
As an example, I don't have the whole list in front of me.
Okay, that's fine.
But the reason that I don't have that is because the way their governments operate are not as comparable to ours as Germany, Canada, and Japan. I think that's kind of how I decided who I was going to mention.
Mrs. Beto, you've had yours for a while.
So you have the age of 75, and then you gave us some stats for cognitive decline. And cognitive decline can happen at 65. Some people can reach 90 and still be very mentally sharp. So picking an age and using the statistics that you've shown us, wouldn't it be more effective to instead have justices go through cognitive assessments?
Yeah, okay. So there are and you're saying cognitive assessment instead of mandatory retirement, just a cognitive test?
Instead of an age limit.
Okay. So there are a few issues I have with that. So that makes me think of the president. The president goes through an annual physical, and he releases that information. However, the president is not legally required to, and I think it would be very difficult to legally require the Supreme Court justices to release these records. And the main issue with that is that it only tackles my third confirm audio as a whole, because there is still the risk of partisanship. And there is a way, like, who would administer the test? How would we say it's unbiased? Could that test be used against justices in a way where it's like, oh, you have to pass this next one, or they passed this one well, that means they're on for another X amount of years. I think there is still a risk of gaming the system in that sense, and I think this is the clearest, most decisive way to just eliminate that as a whole.
Follow-up to that then. So yes, maybe that would be difficult, but isn't amending the Constitution probably more difficult?
It is. It is very difficult. I think it is the best avenue we should do, though. Would you like me to explain why it is? Or is that your question?
Well, yes. So you did give us some numbers. You said it's been amended, 27 times? 10 of those were with the Bill of Rights, correct?
Correct.
And so the other times were those, most of them were under duress, or there was a war happening.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't seem like something that would be that easy to do. Perhaps there are other measures that could be taken rather than going straight to amending the Constitution.
Yeah, so there are three ways you could go. You could go executive order, but that could be immediately reversed by the next president, and the Supreme Court itself can overturn it. You can do by law through Congress. That doesn't get around the issue of the Supreme Court changing it. We're directly confronting the body that can alter these things, so that's why an amendment, it's the most difficult, but it's the most durable. The Supreme Court has never challenged a constitutional amendment, and that would mean it has to go through 38 legislative processes, but I think that it is doable. From the statistics of the public interest, I think that's very doable.
Mrs. Thompson, is that a follow-up? It's been a minute.
But it's important. It's quick, I think.
Okay, I'd love to give Mr. Mars a chance, but we'll give you a couple seconds.
So the quick question is, in that second point with the index, did they cite the Supreme Court specifically, or was it all federal judges, all judges?
I'm so sorry. Could you
So
repeat the
in
first
your
part of that
second
question?
point where you
Yes.
talked about the index that said
yes,
that
constraints
we're...
on government hours. No, it is all of the above. It is not specifically by name.
It didn't specifically cite Supreme Court?
No.
Okay.
All right, Mr. Mars.
Thank you. Just kidding. I want you to imagine that your proposal was accepted 30 years ago.
Okay.
Okay? It's been in place for 30 years. What major court cases are different now? What world do we live in?
Okay. I would say Roe v. Wade. That's going to be my initial one. I think the Roe v. Wade situation would have gone very differently. Part of what I think of when I am mentioning the partisanship is the leak of the Dobbs decision of Roe v. Wade, and it was leaked to put pressure on the conservative. You're smiling really big right now. It was leaked to put pressure on the conservative justices, and nobody knows who leaked it. And if they do know, that's not published information. And after that, the conservative justices had to go under Secret Service. There was an assassin arrested on Kavanaugh's street who admitted to an assassination attempt. This was an overt assassination attempt. And if he went through with it, if Kavanaugh feared for his life enough, or if he actually went through with the assassination, that means that there would have been an opening on the court, and the court's decision would have been changed. I think it ended up getting overturned in the end, but that sort of warfare around that case would have been very different.
That was a tough question, and I thought you handled it well.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
But you brought up assassinations.
I did.
And assassination attempts are not unique to our Supreme Court justices.
They're not.
Political polarization is not unique to our nomination and appointment process. Would you agree that our presidential elections are quite polarized?
I would.
So what is it about changing the term limits or giving term limits still on the court that changes the polarization?
I think it doesn't change the underlying issue of polarization as a whole. I think that's something that's really ingrained into our society right now. We, with media, we are like re-entering an era of tribalism. We are getting fed what we want to hear, and we are getting affirmed in what we believe no matter what. So I think that is just an underlying issue in America as a whole that this is not going to change. But I'm talking specifically about the court, specifically partisanship regarding the confirmation processes, and where they're changing rules over, like, you can appoint before the election, you can't afterwards. It is very specifically the confirmation process and about the Supreme Court. It is not partisanship as a whole. It is does that not answer your question?
I think you're going the right direction. And I'll leave it at this. I was just pointing out that I think maybe you're addressing a symptom and not the disease.
I see.
But we can let someone else ask a question.
This is probably going to be an easier one than that. Okay, so 18 years limit. You're a senior. You may have heard of the term senioritis.
Yes.
Have you maybe have experienced it, or others around you have experienced it? So the quality of your work perhaps was maybe different at the beginning of the year compared to the end, not you specifically, a senior, for example. If we're talking about an 18-year term limit for somebody, what is the risk of their in year 15, 16, 17 of them being a lame duck? And how is that different from cognitive decline or being old? Like, how is that not also a risk for the highest court in the land?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. I hadn't even thought of that. But I think my response to that would be, I hope that this system incentivizes Supreme Court justices, when they're done with the position, to retire. As I mentioned earlier, it gives presidents an 18-year block, not exactly 18 years with a certain justice. So if after 10 years they feel like their capacity is maxed out, it would give them the opportunity to step down from that position, while that president can reappoint someone for those remaining 8 years. They're not like holding onto their seat because they're waiting to outlast a president or because they feel like they're going to let anybody down. I think if they are ready to leave, they have that ability.
Sure.
So let's imagine that this has gotten passed somehow into a constitutional amendment, which is a big step, and justices are forced to retire at 75 years old. And in the meantime, we figure out how to deal with that pesky little cognitive decline problem going on in my brain. And so now justices are forced to retire at 75, and they've still got another 30 years to live. Do you think, so imagine, I know it's a lot of hypotheticals there. Is there a risk that in the last year, this is sort of follow-up to that they don't turn into senioritis, that it actually starts lobbying on some of these court cases where they start saying, oh, if I do, make this decision, maybe I get a nice little job at this company afterwards? Is there a risk that because they become private citizens again, they don't have lifetime appointments, that they could start to use that influence to like feather their nests.
See, I don't think that is a huge risk because as of right now, Supreme Court justices receive pension afterwards, and in my proposal, that system would remain the same. They would still receive pension. They would have a good living for themselves in that sense. But if they would like to stay in the workforce, I think being a Supreme Court justice as a whole is already a great feather in the cap, and I think that they would be able to get the positions that they want in just from that merit alone.
Vein, with this 75 retirement at 75, would this make it so that more presidents would be appointing younger and younger judges? I mean, why would a president then elect a judge over 57, for example?
Yeah, I think the incentive is there. I think 57 being the oldest that they would appoint is reasonable, but I think this kind of goes back. It's a little inconvenient that they would have to appoint 2 justices per 18-year block, but if they really feel strongly about appointing someone who is 60, say, and they reach 75, they would still be able to appoint someone for that last 3 years. So yes, it does seem like more rational to appoint someone that is in their 50s instead, but that possibility of appointing someone in their 60s is very real.
All right, that's our time. Let's give her a hand.
Yeah.
All right, you guys get the full 20 minutes. I will see you in 20 minutes at 6:30.